This is the Doing Business School Abroad podcast. I'm Ken Globerman, and if you're interested in going to business school somewhere out of your country, this is definitely the podcast series for you. Episode 9, References. Welcome back to our podcast series. We've talked about a ton of things, and we're kind of winding down to the last few episodes in our season. Hopefully, you're picking up some really good information by now and into the throes of figuring out where you want to apply to and sort of how you're going to plan both the GMAT and GRE prep process, as well as getting some of those essays and personal statement written. Now we're going to talk about references. Yes, references. If you ever looked for an apartment and if you ever were looking for a job, in both instances, most people who are decision makers ask you for a point of reference, right? If you ever look to rent an apartment, they often look for a reference from a past landlord. Jobs look for past job references. Schools are no different, right? So when you're applying to business school, part of the application process is to provide references. Now, who are those people? Well, generally, there are two broad categories of who your references could be. The first category are your professional references. These are people who you've worked with in the work arena, whether they be colleagues or supervisors. And the second general category would be academic references. And this would generally be a instructor or professor that has been, to whom you've been a student of at some point in the recent past. And many schools will ask for 2 or 3 references, and they may give you indication as to whether those references should be either professional or academic or some blend of the two. So you have to check with the application, with the application directions for each of the schools that you are applying to, right? Now, how does the reference work? Generally speaking, schools don't like to have the references go through you, the applicant's hands. And what they generally do is provide you a way to give that person that you've solicited to provide you a reference, a way to send the reference directly routed to the applications office on your behalf. Why do they do this? So that you can't fudge the reference, right? So that you don't see the reference. So obviously you want to pick somebody to write you this referral who you trust, because you're not going to know what they've written exactly, right? So, and usually what happens is the university will have some type of guidance that they provide your potential reference with. And the guidance will just give them a series of questions to consider. It may ask them to fill out a form. It may ask them open-ended questions. So it may also provide them with some rating scale to rate your skills on like a 1 to 5 scale, a 1 to 10 scale. It's all kind of up. It's all open, right? So every school will have their way and their way of interacting with your references, and will have the information that they want to gather. Now, what makes that difficult then is that for every reference that you get, if you want that person to be a reference for more than one school, they're going to probably have to fill out several forms. So there's not much of an economy of scale here. Generally, they can't write like one general reference. And in some cases, it may work. But in other cases, they're probably going to have to answer specific questions that are provided by that school specifically. So you got to make sure that you choose people who you know want to help you, that obviously would advocate for you, that have a positive feeling working with you, and don't burden them too much, because remember that every one of these that they do probably has to be done separately. So you probably don't want to go to one person and ask them to be a reference for 10 schools, right? It may be just a little bit too much to ask of them. So who not to choose as a reference? You probably don't want to choose personal relationships or relationships that are purely personal as references here. You know, like a family member wouldn't be appropriate. Also, probably a friend in this case wouldn't be appropriate unless the school specifically requires you to provide a personal reference. So unless that's the case, don't think about those. You want to think professional and you want to think academic. Okay? So summarizing, references are ways for the university to get other people's feedback on you, third-party feedback. They are important. They generally fall into two categories: professional and academic. Every school is going to probably have different questions and response topics that the reference person is going to have to fill out. So you don't want to burden that person with too many of these. You'll probably want to have a few different people that you're comfortable going to with this ask. So plan that in advance. Okay. So that's what I wanted to get across to you regarding references. We're getting close to the end of the series. Our next episode is going to talk about the all-important CV or resume for those of you who are listening in from the United States. So until you come back to listen to episode 10, I'll wish you a wonderful day. This is Ken signing off. Take care. Bye.